Lieutenant Commander Lee Tae-ho checked his watch for the third time in 10 minutes. The mission was supposed to be simple. A quick scan of the outer rim sectors and back to Earth before anyone even knew they were gone. His small team aboard the experimental ship Taeguk was perfect for this kind of work. Staff Sergeant Park Ji-woo knew explosives better than anyone in the fleet, and Corporal Kim De-young could hack any communication system in the known galaxy. The stars looked different. Out here, past the edge of human space, everything felt empty and cold. Lee Tae-ho had been on dozens of missions, but something about this region made his skin crawl. Maybe it was the complete silence on all frequencies or the way their sensors kept picking up strange readings that disappeared when they tried to focus on them. Park Ji-woo was running maintenance checks on their defense systems when the first alien ship appeared. It was massive, easily 10 times the size of their small vessel, and shaped like nothing any human engineer had ever designed. The hull seemed to be made of some kind of living metal that shifted and moved like liquid. The ship just sat there in space, watching them. Kim De-young tried to establish communication, but got only static in response. Then more ships appeared, 5 of them, then 20. Then so many that the stars themselves seemed to disappear behind their hulls. Lee Tae-ho had never seen anything like it. The alien fleet stretched as far as his sensors could reach inside the lead ship. Admiral Kethvar of the Vorthak Empire studied the small human vessel with amusement. His species had conquered this part of the galaxy 3,000 years ago. Nothing had challenged their dominance since the Great War that ended with their enemies scattered to the void. These new creatures in their tiny ship looked like easy prey. The Vorthak were proud warriors, standing over 8 feet tall with natural armor plating and claws that could tear through steel. They had never met another species that could match them in battle. Their ships were equipped with weapons that could crack planets and shields that had never been breached. They viewed themselves as the perfect predators. Admiral Kethvar ordered his boarding parties to prepare. The plan was simple: disable the alien vessel, capture the crew alive, and study them to learn about their homeworld. Then the real fleet would launch, and this new species would join the long list of races that served the Vorthak Empire. It would be over before it even began. On the Taeguk, Lee Tae-ho watched the alien ships moving into position. He could see the smaller craft detaching from the main vessels, boarding parties. He had expected this. The moment he saw the size of their fleet, he knew fighting was pointless. But surrendering was not in his vocabulary. He turned to his team. Park Ji-woo was already setting charges throughout the ship. Not to destroy it, but to create kill zones. Kim De-young had isolated all their computer systems and was preparing to wipe their databases if capture seemed certain. They had trained for situations like this, even if they never expected to face aliens. The first boarding craft attached to their hull with a sound like thunder. Lee Tae-ho could hear cutting tools working through their outer door. The aliens were taking their time, confident that the humans inside were helpless. He smiled. It was a mistake they would not live to repeat. The airlock exploded inward, and the first Vorthak warrior stepped through. He was huge, covered in natural armor and carrying weapons that hummed with energy. Behind him came dozens more, all expecting to find terrified primitives cowering in the corners. What they found instead was Lee Tae-ho waiting calmly with a modified plasma rifle. The first alien died before he understood what was happening. The second managed to raise his weapon before Park Ji-woo detonated a shaped charge that sent metal fragments through his skull. The boarding party that had expected easy victory suddenly found themselves trapped in a corridor designed to kill them. Lee Tae-ho moved like death itself. Every step was calculated, every shot perfectly placed. He used the ship's tight corridors to prevent the aliens from using their numbers against him. When they tried to advance, he fell back to prepared positions. When they tried to retreat, he followed and cut them down. Park Ji-woo had turned the entire ship into a weapon. Every door was booby-trapped, every junction held a surprise. The alien superior technology meant nothing when they were fighting on human terms in human space. Lee Tae-ho had spent 20 years learning how to kill people who were bigger, stronger, and better. Armed than him, Kim De-young monitored the alien communications and fed information to the others. She could hear their confusion and growing fear. They had expected resistance to collapse in minutes. Instead, they were losing entire squads to just 3 humans. The reports going back to their ships spoke of demons and impossible tactics on the lead Vorthak vessel. Admiral Kethvar watched his boarding parties disappear one by one. His sensors showed the human ship was still intact, but somehow, his warriors were dying faster than they could advance. He had sent 3 full assault teams and none had managed to secure even a single corridor. The reports from his surviving troops were impossible to believe. The humans moved too fast, fought too hard, and seemed to know exactly where each attack would come from. They used their own ship against the boarding parties, turning every advantage into a trap. It was like fighting ghosts that could kill with a touch hours past the human ship, should have been secured long ago. Instead, Admiral Kethvar found himself sending reinforcements to rescue his original boarding parties. The small vessel had become a graveyard for Vorthak warriors. Each attempt to break through resulted in more casualties and no progress. Lee Tae-ho was running low on ammunition, but he was far from finished. Park Ji-woo had rigged the main corridor with explosives that would take out an entire squad. Kim De-young had managed to hack into one of the alien weapons and was using it against its former owners. They were outnumbered 1,000 to 1, but they were winning. The turning point came when Lee Tae-ho led a counterattack into the boarding craft itself. The aliens had expected the humans to stay defensive. Instead, they found themselves fighting for their lives on their own ships. Lee Tae-ho moved through the alien vessel like he had built it himself, finding weak points and exploiting them with deadly precision. Park Ji-woo followed behind, him setting charges that would cripple the boarding craft when they withdrew. Kim De-young stayed on the Taeguk, coordinating their movements and watching for additional threats. The 3 humans worked together like parts of a single weapon each, one covering the other's weaknesses. When the explosions tore through the boarding craft, Admiral Kethvar finally understood what he was facing. These were not primitive creatures to be easily conquered. These were predators, every bit as dangerous as his own people and far more clever. They had turned his own tactics against him and made his superior numbers meaningless. The order to withdraw came just as Lee Tae-ho was preparing to board the lead alien ship. The Vorthak fleet pulled back, leaving their dead behind and carrying word of the strange new species that fought like nothing they had ever encountered. The humans had won their first battle against the Galaxy A's. The alien ships disappeared into hyperspace. Lee Tae-ho surveyed the damage to his vessel. They had lost main engines, life support was failing, and their communication array was destroyed. But they were alive, and they had sent a message to whoever was listening. Humanity would not go quietly into the night. 3 survivors began repairs, knowing that this was just the beginning. The aliens would be back, and next time they would bring more ships, more weapons, and more warriors. But Lee Tae-ho was not worried. He had learned something important about their new enemies. They could be beaten, and if they could be beaten, they would be. 3 months after the first encounter, word of Lee Tae-ho spread through Vorthak space like wildfire. The warrior who had destroyed 3 boarding parties with just 2 companions was no longer just a human. He had become something else in their minds, a creature of shadow and death that could appear anywhere without warning. The Vorthak called him Silent Death because his attacks came without sound or signal. One day a patrol ship would be cruising peacefully through space. The next day, it would be found drifting empty with all crew members dead, and no sign of how the killer had come or gone. The survivors who lived to tell the tale spoke of impossible speed and tactical genius. Admiral Kethvar had lost sleep thinking about the human. He had studied every recording from that first battle, analyzing each movement, each decision, trying to understand how 3 primitive aliens had defeated his best warriors. The answer was always the same. They were not primitive at all. They were something the galaxy had never seen before. Reports came in daily from across Vorthak territory. Trading posts went silent. Mining colonies disappeared. Military bases reported strange accidents that killed entire garrisons. The humans were conducting a one-ship war against the entire empire, and they were winning. Every engagement showed the same pattern: perfect planning, flawless execution, and no survivors to explain what had happened. The Galactic Council on Nexus Prime received their first reports about humans from Ambassador Veltar of the Zenthari Republic. The Xanthari were known throughout the galaxy for their ability to see possible futures, and their peaceful nature had kept them safe for thousands of years. Now their precognitive abilities were showing them visions that filled them with terror. Velter stood before the 12 council members describing creatures that fought without fear and killed without mercy. His species had seen the rise and fall of countless civilizations, but never had they encountered beings whose very existence seemed to twist the fabric of fate itself. The humans represented something new and dangerous. Most council members dismissed the reports as exaggeration. The Vorthak were known for their pride and probably could not admit they had been defeated by primitives. The Xanthari were peaceful to a fault, and often saw threats where none existed. Surely these humans were just another aggressive species that would burn itself out through reckless expansion. Only Archon Thelvas of the Eternal Dominion took the report seriously. He had lived for 50,000 years and seen the birth and death of entire galactic civilizations. Something in the descriptions of human tactics reminded him of legends from the ancient past, stories of species that had nearly destroyed all life before disappearing into the void. Back on Earth, military command promoted Li Teho to captain and gave him command of a proper warship, the Hanbokwazo, 3 times the size of the Teguk and carried enough firepower to level a small moon. His crew now included Lieutenant Commander Choi Min-seo, a strategic analyst whose mind worked like a computer, and Major Yoon Sung-jin, whose specialty was breaking enemy morale. Their official mission was diplomatic first contact with the Galactic Council and negotiations for trade agreements. Everyone knew the real purpose was to show the galaxy what humanity could do when they stopped playing defense. The Hanbok carried enough weapons and supplies for a year of independent operations. During their journey to Council space, the crew encountered a distress signal from a civilian transport. The ship was under attack by pirates in an asteroid field. The odds were 12 enemy vessels against 1 human warship. Captain Li Teho did not hesitate to respond. The pirates expected easy prey when they saw the unknown ship approaching. Their leader, Captain Draxon, had been raiding this sector for 20 years and knew every species in the area. These newcomers in their strange vessel would either pay tribute or become salvage. It was that simple. The battle that followed became legend among the surviving pirates. The human ship moved through the asteroid field like it had been born there. Using the rocks as cover and weapons, Captain Li Teho picked apart the pirate fleet 1 ship at a time. Each attack came from an impossible angle. Each retreat led the enemy into another trap. Lieutenant Commander Choi Min-seo coordinated the entire engagement from the bridge. Her tactical display showed every asteroid, every enemy ship, and every possible trajectory. She fed information to the weapons crews with split-second timing, turning the chaotic battlefield into a perfectly orchestrated dance of destruction. Major Yoon Sung-jin took over communications and began broadcasting messages to the pirate crews. He spoke in their own language, telling them exactly how they were going to die, describing the tactical situation so clearly that several ships surrendered rather than face certain destruction. The psychological warfare was as effective as the physical combat. When the battle ended, 11 pirate vessels had been destroyed and 1 had surrendered. The rescued transport carried refugees from 6 different species, all fleeing various conflicts in Council space. They had never seen anything like the human rescue operation. The willingness to risk everything for strangers was completely alien to their experience. Among the refugees was Dr. Chen Malik, a Xanthari scientist who had been studying human transmissions intercepted near the border. He watched Captain Li Teho coordinate the rescue efforts and realized that the reports reaching the Council had been incomplete. These humans were not just deadly warriors. They were something far more dangerous. The refugees spread word of the rescue throughout Council space. Stories of humans who fought not for conquest or profit, but simply because helping others was the right thing to do. The concept was so foreign to most galactic species that many dismissed it as propaganda. But the survivors were there. They had seen it happen. Dr. Chen Malik sent detailed reports to Ambassador Feltar describing human behavior patterns that defied every known model of species development. These beings seemed to operate on principles that put group survival above individual benefit. Even when facing certain death, they chose to protect others rather than themselves. As news of the rescue reached Nexus Prime, the council members began to realize they were facing something unprecedented. The humans were not following any of the established patterns for emerging species. They were not seeking territory or resources or dominance. They were simply doing what they believed was right. The Vorthak Empire sent emergency messages to the council requesting immediate military assistance against what they now called the human plague. Every day brought new reports of impossible defeats and mysterious disappearances. Their proud warrior culture was collapsing under the weight of constant fear. Ambassador Veltar presented the council with detailed psychological profiles of human behavior compiled by the best minds in Zenthari space. The conclusion was terrifying. These beings possessed all the tactical abilities of the greatest predator species, combined with moral principles that made them completely unpredictable by normal standards. Some council members argued for immediate military action before the humans could spread further. Others suggested diplomatic contact to determine their intentions. A few recommended complete isolation, hoping that the human expansion would burn itself out before reaching council territory. All agreed that something had to be done. The debate was still ongoing when long-range sensors detected the approach of a single human vessel. The Hanbok was heading straight for Nexus Prime, carrying Captain Li Teho and his crew directly into the heart of galactic civilization. The council would soon face the humans they had been discussing and learn firsthand whether the reports were true. Captain Li Teho stood on the bridge of the Hanbok, watching the massive space station grow larger on the view screen. He knew they were completely surrounded by the most powerful fleets in the galaxy. He also knew it did not matter. If diplomacy failed, he would find a way to complete his mission and return to Earth with the information humanity needed. The galaxy was about to discover what it meant to negotiate with humans. Captain Li Teho walked through the corridors of Nexus Prime, accompanied by his diplomatic team. The ancient space station was larger than any human city and filled with technology that seemed to bend reality itself. Gravity flowed in impossible directions while walls displayed scenes from distant worlds in real time. Dr. Han So-young walked beside him, studying everything with the eyes of a scientist. Her expertise in alien biology had already identified 17 different atmospheric zones, designed to accommodate species with wildly different environmental needs. Commander Nam Jae-hyun brought up the rear, his calm expression hiding the tactical assessment running constantly through his mind. The council chamber was designed to intimidate. Representatives of 12 ancient species sat in judgment, their forms ranging from crystalline beings that sang in harmonics to gas clouds that shifted between dimensions. The architecture itself seemed alive with surfaces that responded to thought and lighting that adjusted to the emotional state of those present. At the center of it all sat Archon Thelvas of the Eternal Dominion. The oldest known sentient being in the galaxy had witnessed the rise and fall of countless civilizations over his 50,000-year lifespan. His ancient eyes had seen species burn themselves out through war or fade away through complacency. Now he faced something entirely new. Captain Li Teho approached the speaker's platform without any sign of fear or awe. His movements were controlled, precise and confident, as if he owned the space around him. Dr. Han So-young had briefed him on each species present, but he had already identified their strengths and weaknesses through simple observation. Formal proceedings began with Ambassador Veltar presenting the human request for council membership. His words were carefully chosen, describing Earth as a peaceful civilization seeking trade and cultural exchange. The other representatives listened, politely, while their private communications buzzed with very different assessments. Captain Li Teho stepped forward to address the council. His voice was calm and steady as he spoke about humanity's desire for peaceful coexistence with other, intelligent species. He outlined trade proposals, cultural exchange programs, and scientific cooperation agreements. Everything a diplomatic mission should contain. But Archon Thelvas was not listening to the words. He was watching the human's body language, studying the micro-expressions that revealed true intentions. This being was conducting a constant tactical assessment of the chamber, identifying sightlines, escape routes, and potential weapons. Even while speaking of peace, he was planning for war. The other council members were beginning to notice it too. Captain Li Teho showed no deference to their ancient authority. No awe at their technological achievements. No fear of their combined military might. He spoke to them as equals, which was either profound ignorance or absolute confidence in his own abilities. Dr. Han So-young provided detailed scientific data about human civilization. The population figures, resource consumption, and technological development all suggested a typical emerging species. Nothing in the official reports indicated any threat to established galactic order, yet something about the humans felt fundamentally different. Commander Nam Jae-hyun remained silent throughout the proceedings, but his presence was unmistakable. Every council member could feel the weight of his attention as he catalogued their defensive positions, noted their security protocols, and calculated response times. The humans were gathering intelligence even during diplomatic talks. The formal session was interrupted by an emergency alert. Long-range sensors had detected massive movement in the Outer Rim territories. The Devourers had awakened from their 1,000-year sleep and were already consuming entire star systems. In their methodical advance toward the galactic core, the Council erupted in controlled panic. The Devourers were an ancient enemy that emerged periodically from dark space to strip all biological matter from inhabited worlds. Their bioships operated on principles that Council science could barely comprehend, and their numbers seemed infinite. 3 Council species had homeworlds directly in the projected path of the Devourer advance: the Zenthari Republic, the Calarian Hegemony, and the Brass Collective were facing complete extinction within months unless the invasion could be stopped. Every available fleet was already mobilizing for what would likely be a futile defense. In the midst of the chaos, Captain Lee Tae-ho did something that stunned every being present. He volunteered the Hanbok and her crew to join the defense effort. The offer came without hesitation, without consultation with his superiors, and without any expectation of reward. It was simply the right thing to do. Silence that followed was profound. Representatives who had spent centuries debating minor trade disputes were speechless at this display of selfless courage. Dr. Han So-young calmly explained that this was normal human behavior. They protected others because it was their nature, not because they expected compensation. Commander Nam Jae-hyun stepped forward and provided detailed tactical analysis of the Devourer threat. His assessment was more thorough than anything the Council military advisors had produced, and identified several strategic opportunities that had been completely overlooked. His understanding of space combat was clearly superior. The human approach to warfare was fundamentally different from anything the Council had seen. They did not rely on technological superiority or overwhelming firepower. Instead, they used creativity, adaptation, and willingness to sacrifice for others. Captain Lee Tae-ho outlined strategies that were both brilliant and terrifying. Archon Thelvas made a decision that surprised everyone. He granted humanity provisional council membership in exchange for their assistance against the Devourers. The ancient being had seen enough to know that these newcomers represented something special. They might be the key to surviving what was coming. The vote split. The council representatives from older, more established civilizations worried that humans would disrupt the careful balance of power that had maintained galactic peace for thousands of years. Younger species saw opportunity in the human offer of protection against ancient threats. Captain Lee Tae-ho accepted the provisional membership with the same calm confidence he had shown throughout the proceedings. He outlined the human contribution to the defense effort and requested access to council military databases and fleet coordination protocols. His tactical requirements were specific and non-negotiable. Dr. Han So-young began coordinating with council scientists to share information about Devourer biology and behavior patterns. Her approach was methodical and thorough, treating alien colleagues as equals rather than superiors. This attitude of mutual respect was as unusual as the human military capabilities. The session ended with emergency fleet deployments being organized under Joint Human Council command. Captain Lee Tae-ho would coordinate overall strategy, while council admirals provided local knowledge and resources. The arrangement was unprecedented, but the circumstances left no alternatives as the representatives filed out of the chamber. Many were already questioning the wisdom of accepting human help. The brief diplomatic contact had revealed beings whose capabilities far exceeded their official descriptions. They were not just another emerging species seeking membership. They were potential predators whose true intentions remained unknown. Ambassador Veltar lingered behind to speak with Captain Lee Tae-ho privately. His precognitive abilities were showing him possible futures that ranged from unprecedented galactic prosperity to complete civilizational collapse. The key variable in every vision was how humanity chose to use their growing influence. Captain Lee Tae-ho listened politely to the Zenthari warnings about the responsibility that came with power. He assured the ambassador that humans understood the weight of their actions and would never abuse the trust being placed in them. His words were sincere, but the future remained uncertain. The immediate crisis was clear. The Devourers were advancing, and only human tactical innovation offered hope of stopping them, but the long-term implications of human membership in galactic civilization were still unfolding. Everyone agreed that after the current emergency was resolved, the galaxy would never be the same. As Captain Lee Tae-ho prepared to lead the combined fleets against humanity's first galactic threat, he knew they were fighting for more than just the survival of threatened worlds. They were proving that humans deserved their place among the stars and defining what that place would be. The combined Council fleet arrived at the Zenthari home system to witness a nightmare beyond imagination. Millions of Devourer bioships swarmed through space like a living plague, each one the size of a human destroyer, moving with perfect coordination that spoke of a single controlling intelligence. The beautiful blue-green world below was already showing brown patches where the harvest had begun. Captain Lee Tae-ho stood on the bridge of the Hanbok, studying sensor readings that defied everything he knew about warfare. The enemy vessels were not built, they were grown. Their hulls pulsed with organic rhythms, and their weapons fired streams of living energy that adapted to whatever they encountered. 3 Council fleets had already tried to stop them using conventional tactics. The results were scattered debris fields and the haunting final transmissions of crews who died screaming as their ships were consumed from within. The Devourers did not simply destroy their enemies, they absorbed them, breaking down matter at the molecular level to fuel their own growth. Every defeat made them stronger. Admiral Kethvar of the Vorthak Empire commanded one of the surviving fleets. His proud warriors were shaken by their first encounter with an enemy that felt no fear, showed no mercy, and learned from every exchange. The Vorthak way of war was based on intimidation and superior aggression. Neither tactic worked against creatures that were already perfect predators. Captain Lee Tae-ho called for a fleet commanders' conference aboard the Hanbok. Representatives from 12 different species gathered to hear the human analysis of their situation. Dr. Han So-young presented detailed biological studies showing that the Devourers shared a quantum-linked consciousness that allowed instant communication across vast distances. The enemy was not just numerous, they were essentially a single organism spread across millions of individual units. Every tactical innovation used against them was immediately countered by the entire swarm. Every weakness exploited was instantly corrected throughout their forces. It was like fighting an opponent who could learn and adapt in real time. Commander Nam Jae-hyun outlined the strategic situation. With brutal honesty, the Council fleets were designed for conventional warfare between civilized opponents who followed established rules of engagement. The Devourers followed no rules, except the consumption of all biological matter. They could not be negotiated with, frightened, or deceived. The assembled admirals listened in growing despair as the humans explained why every previous battle had failed. The Council approach was to maintain safe distances and rely on superior firepower while minimizing casualties. This conservative strategy was useless against an enemy that grew stronger with each ship it consumed. Captain Lee Tae-ho proposed a battle plan that horrified every military professional present. Instead of maintaining formation and fighting defensively, he suggested breaking the human fleet into small independent units that would penetrate deep into the Devourer swarm. Each unit would operate without support, striking critical targets before disappearing into the Chaos Admiral. Kethvar argued that such tactics were suicide. The humans would be outnumbered thousands to 1, with no hope of escape or rescue. Lieutenant Commander Choi Min-seo calmly explained that humans had been perfecting small unit tactics against overwhelming odds for their entire evolutionary history. Fear of death was less important than mission success. Major Yoon Sung-jin added that psychological warfare would be crucial to breaking the Devourer's collective consciousness. The enemy had never faced prey that fought back with coordinated ferocity. If they could create enough chaos in the quantum link, they might cause the entire swarm to fragment into confused individual units. The battle plan was approved despite protests from every council. Admiral Captain Lee Tae-ho would lead the assault with the Hanbok, while other human ships struck predetermined targets throughout the Swarm Council. Forces would provide covering fire and capitalize on any opportunities created by the human attacks. The engagement began with Captain Lee Tae-ho taking his ship directly into the center of the Devourer formation. The Hanbok moved like a living thing, weaving between bioships 10 times her size, while her weapons carved paths of destruction through enemy ranks. Commander Nam Jae-hyun coordinated the other human vessels in a deadly dance of synchronized violence. Dr. Han So-young monitored the quantum communications between Devourer units, watching for signs of disruption in their collective consciousness. The enemy was already showing confusion at the human tactics. Their predictive algorithms could not account for beings who willingly flew into certain death to achieve tactical objectives. The turning point came when Lieutenant Commander Choi Min-seo identified the Central Command Organism, a creature the size of a space station, that was directing the entire invasion. The bioship was heavily defended and located deep within the swarm, where no sane commander would risk their vessel. Captain Lee Tae-ho immediately changed course. The assault on the command creature became the stuff of legend. Captain Lee Tae-ho led a boarding party through corridors made of living tissue, while environmental systems pumped poison into the air. Major Yoon Sung-jin planted explosive charges at critical neural junctions while fighting through immune responses that treated them like an infection. The Devourers had never encountered prey that could penetrate their command structure and strike at their central nervous system. The quantum link that gave them their greatest advantage became a weapon against them, as feedback from the dying command organism sent waves of confusion throughout the entire swarm. Individual bioships began operating independently for the first time in their species' history. Some fled the battle while others attacked their own kind. The perfect coordination that had made them unstoppable dissolved into chaos as millions of creatures suddenly found themselves thinking as individuals rather than parts of a collective mind. Council fleets seized the opportunity created by human sacrifice. Moving in coordinated strikes, they destroyed confused and isolated Devourer units while the enemy was still reeling. From the psychological shock, Admiral Kethvar led the Vorthak forces in an assault that would have been impossible against an organized enemy. The battle raged for 18 hours, with human ships penetrating deeper into the swarm than any council vessel had ever survived. Captain Lee Tae-ho personally led 7 different boarding actions, each one targeting a critical node in the Devourer command structure. His crew followed him into certain death because they trusted his tactical genius completely. When the surviving Devourers finally fled into dark space, they left behind the shattered remains of an invasion force that had seemed unstoppable. The Council fleet surveyed the aftermath in amazement. Human casualties were surprisingly light despite their aggressive tactics, while enemy losses exceeded anything achieved in previous encounters. The victory celebration was subdued. Captain Lee Tae-ho had proven that the Devourers could be defeated, but at a terrible cost. 60% of human forces were destroyed or damaged in the final assault. The survivors were heroes, but they were also mourning friends who had died to save civilizations. They had never seen Dr. Han So-young compile detailed reports on Devourer biology and tactics that would become standard reference materials for galactic defense forces. Her research showed that the enemy could be stopped, but only through the kind of coordinated sacrifice that humans seemed uniquely capable of making. The political implications of the victory were immediately apparent. Humans had not just participated in galactic defense, they had led it. Their tactical innovations and willingness to accept casualties had turned certain defeat into overwhelming victory. Council species that had dismissed them as primitives now looked at them with mixture of gratitude and fear. Admiral Kethvar formally surrendered command of his fleet to Captain Lee Tae-ho, declaring that the humans had earned the right to lead through superior courage and tactical ability. Other Vorthak commanders followed suit, abandoning their traditional hierarchy to serve under human leadership. The psychological impact rippled throughout Council space as news of the victory spread throughout. The galaxy younger species began sending diplomatic missions to Earth, seeking alliance with the beings who had saved them from extinction. Older, more established civilizations worried about the implications of human military superiority and began forming their own alliance blocks. Captain Lee Taeho stood on the observation deck of his damaged ship, watching rescue operations retrieve survivors from the battlefield. He knew this victory was just the beginning. The galaxy had seen what humans could accomplish when the stakes were high enough. Now everyone would be watching to see what they would do next. The age of human dominance in galactic affairs had begun. 6 months after the Devourer War, the galaxy was still adjusting to its new reality. Captain Lee Taeho now held the rank of admiral and commanded the largest military force in known space. His victory against an enemy that had terrorized civilizations for millennia had established humans as the dominant military power, but the political consequences were still unfolding. The Vorthak Empire had effectively ceased to exist as an independent entity. Admiral Kethvar and his surviving commanders had formally integrated their fleets into human command structure. Their proud warrior culture had been shattered by the realization that they were no longer the apex predators they had believed themselves to be for 3,000 years. Other species were responding in different ways. The Zenthari Republic embraced human protection, seeing it as their best hope for long-term survival. Their precognitive abilities showed possible futures, where human leadership brought unprecedented peace and prosperity to the galaxy. Ambassador Veltar had become one of Admiral Lee Taeho's most trusted advisors. Dr. Han So-young established the first interspecies military academy on the human colony world of New Soul officers from 47 different species arrived to study human tactical doctrine, but they quickly discovered that the real lessons were not about specific techniques, but about fundamentally different approaches to problem solving. Lieutenant Commander Choi Min Seo taught courses on adaptive strategy, showing alien students how humans instinctively modified their plans based on changing battlefield conditions. The concept of improvisation was alien to most galactic species who preferred detailed long-term planning. The human ability to succeed through controlled chaos was revolutionary. The academy became more than just a military training facility. It was a laboratory for cultural exchange, where different species learned to work together under human leadership. Major Yoon Sung-jin developed psychological conditioning programs that helped alien officers overcome their instinctive fear responses when facing overwhelming odds. Meanwhile, several council species were forming alliance blocks to counter growing human influence. The Eternal Dominion, led by Archon Thelvis, argued that humanity needed to be contained before they destabilized the entire galactic order. The ancient being had seen similar circumstances lead to devastating galactic wars in the distant past. The opposition movement gained momentum when human expansion rates began exceeding all projections. New human colonies were appearing monthly, while their military recruitment programs attracted volunteers from dozens of allied species. The rate of change was unprecedented in galactic history. Commander Nam Jae-hyun coordinated diplomatic contacts with younger species that had been oppressed by council policies for millennia. These civilizations saw humans as liberators rather than conquerors. They eagerly joined what became known as the Human Protection League, seeking defense against their traditional enemies. The League grew rapidly as word spread about human willingness to protect the weak without demanding tribute or submission. Species that had spent centuries paying protection money to stronger neighbors found themselves with genuine allies who asked for nothing in return, except friendship and cooperation. Fear began spreading among the older, more established council species. They had maintained power through careful balance and mutual dependency. Now humans were offering alternatives that made their traditional systems obsolete. Younger species no longer needed to accept exploitation when they could seek human protection instead. The crisis reached a breaking point when the Brass Collective accused humans of deliberately undermining galactic stability. Their homeworld had been saved by human sacrifice during the Devourer War, but now they claimed that human military expansion threatened the peace they had died to protect. Admiral Lee Taeho addressed these concerns in a galaxy-wide broadcast. He explained that humans had no interest in conquest or domination. They simply could not ignore suffering. When they had the power to prevent it, the protection offered to smaller species came with no strings attached and could be withdrawn at any time. Dr. Han So-young published detailed studies showing that human-protected systems experienced dramatic improvements in economic development, technological advancement, and quality of life. The data was undeniable, but it only increased fears among traditional power structures that saw their influence diminishing. The Xanthari Republic issued dire warnings. Based on their precognitive visions, the future remained uncertain, with possible timelines ranging from unprecedented galactic prosperity to complete civilizational collapse. The key variable in every scenario was whether humans would embrace or reject their role as galactic protectors. Ambassador Veltar met privately with Admiral Lee Tae-ho to discuss the weight of responsibility that came with human military superiority. The conversation lasted for hours as they explored the philosophical implications of using force to protect others. The burden of making life and death decisions for entire civilizations was enormous. Major Yoon Sung-jin reported increasing psychological strain among human military personnel. They had volunteered to protect their own species, but now found themselves responsible for the safety of billions of aliens. The moral complexity of their situation was affecting combat effectiveness, as officers questioned every tactical decision. The situation became more complicated when reports arrived of internal conflicts within human-protected territories. Some species were using their new security to settle old grudges against neighbors, while others demanded that humans resolve ancient territorial disputes. The role of galactic police was proving more difficult than military conquest. Lieutenant Commander Choi Min-seo developed new protocols for intervention in interspecies conflicts. Her guidelines emphasized minimal force and neutral arbitration, but the reality was that human decisions now carried the weight of law throughout much of the galaxy. Whether they wanted it or not, they had become the ultimate authority. The opposition movement gained a powerful ally when the Calarian hegemony formally withdrew from all human protection agreements. They argued that trading. The final confrontation arrives when the ancient war machines, known as the Purifiers, breach the galaxy's outer defenses and begin their methodical advance toward the core systems. These automated dreadnoughts are built from materials that predate current physics understanding and operate on principles that council science cannot comprehend. Each machine is larger than a moon and protected by shields that have repelled every weapon the galaxy can deploy. Captain Lee Tae-ho, now promoted to Admiral of the combined Human Council Fleet, faces his greatest challenge. The Purifiers represent perfect efficiency in warfare, designed by a species that achieved technological transcendence before choosing self-destruction over continued existence. They cannot be negotiated with, frightened, or deceived. They simply execute their programming to eliminate all biological life with ruthless precision. Dr. Han So-young's research reveals that the Purifiers' creators embedded one fatal flaw in their design. They cannot adapt to truly irrational behavior. Their tactical algorithms assume that all opponents will act according to logical self-interest, making them vulnerable to strategies that prioritize others' survival over one's own. This discovery validates everything that makes humanity unique in the galaxy. The final battle takes place in the space around Nexus Prime, with Earth's entire fleet and allied forces from 47 different species standing against 12 Purifier dreadnoughts. Lee Tae-ho implements a strategy so audacious that even his own officers initially refused to believe it could work. He orders every human ship to ram the enemy vessels simultaneously, using their crews' lives as weapons to create breaches in the Purifiers' defenses. Lieutenant Commander Choi Min-seo coordinates the sacrifice runs, ensuring that each collision creates maximum damage while giving allied forces clear targeting opportunities. Major Yoon Sung-jin broadcasts messages to every species in the galaxy, explaining that humans are not dying for glory or conquest, but simply because protecting others is who they are. Commander Nam Jae-hyun leads the final assault through the breaches, his ship carrying a quantum virus designed to corrupt the Purifier's central programming. The strategy succeeds beyond all expectations. The Purifiers, unable to comprehend why beings would voluntarily destroy themselves to save others, suffer cascade failures throughout their networks. As their ancient programming collapses, The war machine shut down permanently, ending a threat that could have sterilized the entire galaxy. However, the victory comes at enormous cost. Over 60% of human military forces are destroyed in the final battle. In the aftermath, the surviving council species formally dissolve their old governmental structure and establish a new federation with humanity as the protector species. Admiral Lee Tae-ho becomes the first supreme commander of galactic defense, not through conquest but through universal recognition that humans alone possess the moral courage and tactical brilliance necessary to defend all life against existential threats. The story concludes with Lee Tae-ho standing on the observation deck of the new Federation headquarters, watching ships from hundreds of species working together in ways that would have been impossible under the old council system. Dr. Han So-young joins him, noting that humanity has achieved something unprecedented. They have become the galaxy's apex predator, not through domination, but through their willingness to sacrifice everything for others. The final scene shows new threats emerging from dark space, but now the galaxy faces them united under human leadership, ready to prove once again that sometimes the greatest strength comes from those willing to die for principles rather than live for themselves.